Hi everyone, it's Doreen, and I'm here with Melissa for another engaging and encouraging interview with someone that you're going to definitely want to focus on because he's got a lot to teach all of us. And we're joined today also by someone that you've met previously in our interviews, Danny Cooper. You saw him in our interview of coming out of a Christian cult, and of course he now is focused on helping people to recognize who God is and to follow the true Jesus of the Bible. And he ministers with Melissa. Today we're going to be interviewing our friend Carl Teichrib, who is a phenomenal researcher and prolific author. He's also a lecturer, and his focus is on, he kind of goes undercover to New Age and pagan events. He'll clarify that. And then he writes, he also does evangelizing and apologetics to people at those events. He's an evangelist for Christianity, for God's kingdom. And he's got a few books out. The Game of Gods is one that we'll be talking about today. Both Melissa and Danny have read the book. And so, Carl, thank you so much for joining Melissa and myself and Danny for this chance to talk with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk with you folks, and I'm looking forward to this. This is good.
Yeah.
We should talk about how we met Carl. Melissa and I met you in Dallas, Texas in December 2018 when we were all guests on Michael Heiser's Fringe Pop 321 TV show. And we talked for quite a bit.
Yeah.
We did. It was great. We had a fantastic evening afterwards and just sat around the hotel lobby and got to know each other and shoot the breeze, and it was good. It was really good. It was a lot of fun.
I have a fun background behind it too, because I remember when Doreen and I got there, we were all sitting in the lobby, and Jen and Mike, they were talking about the previous interview that they were just doing. And before that, your name just kept coming up. And Danny would talk about this guy, Carl, my friend Tiffany, who we interviewed as well about her testimony. Carl, Melissa, you need to interview Carl. Melissa and Doreen, you guys, who's Carl? I didn't know, you know what I mean? But your name kept coming up, and I guess you had like a conference that they went to, a few of my friends, and
right.
I don't know, you kept coming up. Well, we're sitting in the lobby, and Jen, I think it was Jen, she's somebody who helps Mike with his videos. She mentioned your name, and I'm all, hold on, Carl who again? Is here? I'm all, I think I just need to meet this guy, because I can't believe that he just keeps coming up in my life, you know? And so you come down, sure enough, and I'm all, hey, Carl. I think we're supposed to interview you, because I think, you know, God's trying to tell us something, you know, and it was the best. You were so lighthearted and fun and amazing to talk to, and I think you're just incredibly approachable. Also to add, Mike Heiser did interview you as well, and your interview will be out in a few weeks, and I'm really looking forward to that, about the subject matter and things like that. So, but yeah, it was fantastic. That whole time in that lobby was just amazing, and it was really great to meet you then, and that's when we set up this interview.
And Melissa, we should mention that our interviews with Michael Heiser are now on his Fringe Pop 321 site.
Yes, mine just came out, yesterday? Yours came out last week, and then our group interview is coming out soon. Doreen and I did one together, and that was an amazing experience.
So, Carl, where do we start?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, one thing, Melissa, you said I was lighthearted, and I'm thankful that you picked up on that. You know, the subjects we talk about are serious, and they are serious. And sometimes the style of the work we do, and it requires that we tackle some hard issues. And at times that scares people, and even turns people off. And I've had Christian friends and Christians who became friends later who saying, hey, you know, your stuff kind of scared me, and it's pretty intense. And yeah, it is. But at the same time, there's joy. We want to be real people, and we like to have fun. We like to interact. We enjoy being with others. And yeah, we got to keep that there too. And yet at the same time, recognizing we're talking about some pretty serious stuff. This is soul changing, soul transforming level work that we are blessed to be able to engage in, just interacting with people.
Yeah, agreed. I think that, can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that? So one good thing about us having a big gap about when we met to now is that it gave time to read your enormous book. I thought I was ordering a book, and it is huge brick, and it's very thorough. And this kind of stuff I can get behind, because a lot of people have conspiracy theories. A lot of people have, these rabbit trails that they go down. But then there's Carl Teichrib's book, who kind of, you go down and cite sources, you do your own work, you visit these places, you see this stuff firsthand. I can get behind that. In your book and in your work that you've done, can you elaborate a little bit more about what it is exactly that you do?
Sure.
That other Christians might find a little uncomfortable, a little bit scary, as you said, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing full-time research work. I consider myself a researcher first in terms of the type of work I do, okay? I do teaching, I do lecturing. Every couple of years, I teach a modular course at Miller College of the Bible. I teach a course on secular pagan trends. And I've been doing this type of work, this type of research work, since full-time since 1997. And before that, going back into the early 1990s, just as a hobby, and it became a hobby that got out of control. And and then from 1997 to 2001, I helped a researcher and a fellow author by the name of Gary Kaw do a lot of the background work for his book, The New World Religion. And so I've been doing this pretty steady for quite a while. And I have no formal background, no formal training in academic research work or academic work that way. And so I just figured, I stumbled through it. That's really all I did, okay? I'm from a farm. I live in the sticks of Manitoba, all right? We're like a backwater for the whole continent. Really we are, but it's a great place still. And people here work hard, play hard. And so I had no real formal training to consider this type of endeavor. And I figured, well, I'll just do what seems proper. Go for the first source. You go for original sources. You don't cite fellow Christians' material. You don't cite a citation of a citation. As much as possible, you dive into the first source or very credible secondary sources, and then you stack your sources. Behind me is a section of my library. I stack my sources. That's what I do. In fact, and Melissa and yeah, Doreen, you guys have seen this with the footnotes in the book. They're stacked. And so that's kind of what I've done. That's what I do. And along the way, I've been to, 35, 45. I really have to take the time to sit down and count. Events of all kinds, looking at issues of world transformation. From 97 till about 2010, a lot of that, 2012, was focused on global governance. So I've been to World Federalist meetings, World Government meetings. These aren't meetings about it. These are meetings with people planning it, collaborating around those concepts. I was at the United Nations Millennium Forum, at the United Nations World Urban Forum, different events that definitely pull the aspect of world order, global governance into play. By the way, there's almost always a spiritual undertone at these events, okay? There's interfaith components. They bring religious leaders into the fray. So it's not just politics, it's politics and religion. And then along the way, I've attended a number of interfaith events. I've been to 2 of the World Parliaments of Religions. I was there for the 2018 Parliament in Toronto, and then the 2015 Parliament in Salt Lake City. I was at the United Religions Initiative, their global summit in 2000, and then a number of other interfaith events. So I've spent quite a bit of time interacting at that level. Transhumanism. I dived into transhumanism because it's about change. It's really about macro change, and that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, Carl, I was going to ask you about AI and transhumanism. I think that's going to be a big thing in the end times, me personally.
Mm-hmm.
at what point, I mean, because I've seen some places where some Christians say, hey, we need to get on board with AI. We need to get on board with it. It's going to be the way of the future. And I want to get your opinion on that. And at what point do we say no? At what point do we say enough is enough as far as I know?
And could you define transhumanism for people who don't know that term also, please?
Sure. First of all, transhumanism is a philosophy and intellectual movement that says ultimately humanity can control our own destiny. We can become masters of meaning and destiny through the works of our hands, through our science and through our technology. Man becomes more than man. We can elevate ourselves. We can even become as gods through our science and our technology. So the technology aims at longevity of life, brain-computer interfacing, consciousness uploading, body augmentation, so that we can become more than human. So we can escape our frailties and our mortality and become God-like in our outcome. Really, it's the idea that we control evolution. And it is a strong intellectual movement, a strong philosophical movement, and it draws on what's happening in terms of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, the list goes on. Everything that we're doing in terms of technology points or indicates that we can do this. We are approaching that point. Now, in terms of artificial intelligence, technologies, and how far we go with it, well, we're using incredible technology right now. Right. Just this whole platform through Zoom and through the internet. Here's the thing. We're immersed in it whether we like it or not. I have Orthodox Mennonites that live only a couple of miles away from me, and they live with horse and buggies, no electricity. It's rough, hard living. And yet at the same time, they're integrating all kinds of technologies from different time periods, including things like old thrashing machines from the 1920s, modern generators to run the shop equipment. It's like, okay, which is the holy century and the holy technology? You're kind of, okay, is there not like there's a tug and pull going on here? I think really it's all around us to a point that we can't escape ourselves from it. We can't pull the plug on ourselves. Right. So we have to be, I think, really careful in terms of what is the worldview it's telling us. What is our technology and this quest for technology preaching to us? Because there's a worldview that's integrated within it. And instead of running away from the technology and instead of embracing the technology, I think the technology now forces us, or should cause us, to ask a lot of questions and hard questions and begin to open up conversations. And that's really big. Hey, if you go to the movies, I'm going to use an old movie, but there's many, many movies. And it's only old in terms of millennials. The movie Avatar. Movie Avatar, okay? Talking about an integration of technology and spirituality and transhumanism and paganism. It's all there, just wrapped up. All right, it's there. You can't escape it. People flock to the movie. You have the opportunity now to talk about it, to bring your Christian worldview into this and compare and contrast. And that's when we can begin to actually break through the onion of what this looks like and go down into the core.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Well, you broke that down really well. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's more complicated than all of that, obviously, you know, and you always run it.
Here.
Yeah.
That's the Cliff Notes version.
I guess, yeah. Years ago, I was at an event where the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia was giving us a breakdown. I was at a conference with the Chicago Council on Foreign Relations, and the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia was giving us a breakdown of his new posting. It was his first time as an ambassador. And let me just back it up a little bit here. I love how the Apostle Paul uses comparative language. He talks about the Christian life as running a race, or being a soldier in the army, or being a farm laborer. We get that. If you've ever been on a farm, you can still figure it out. I've never been a soldier, but I can figure that out. Can I run? Yeah, especially if I'm scared, I can run pretty fast. Not so much anymore than now that I'm over 50, but whatever, you know. We all get the idea. But what does it mean to be an ambassador? Who amongst us has been a diplomat? Have you ever been a diplomat? Have you been assigned at all to the diplomatic field? Have you been involved at all with an embassy? Do you know what this means? We talk about it so easily, to be an ambassador for Christ, because Paul speaks about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting. The U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia broke it down for me, or broke it down for us in our little meeting. And I walked away from that event going, this fits. It helps me to understand what it means to be an ambassador for Christ. The U.S. ambassador said, first of all, for himself, he is there as the legal and official representative of his government. Okay, as Christians, this is wild. I mean, this is honoring. We are the legal and official representatives of the King of Kings.
Mm.
Talk about a high calling.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more beautiful and more powerful than that. Talking about spinning it right back to Genesis and being made in his image, we are his legal and official representatives.
Mm.
And then the ambassador broke it down this way. He says, I have to subordinate my interests to my government's interests. My interests, I don't put my interests forward. I have to put my government's interests forward. Well, it's the same thing for us. We put our king's interests forward. We subsume our interests to his interests because his interests are higher and better than ours anyways. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a negative. It's a positive. And then we find ourselves in a foreign country, in a foreign land, and that place can be friendly or it can be hostile. We're foreigners right now. Wherever you find yourself, you are a foreigner in the culture, in this culture of oneness. You're an ambassador for Christ right where you live, as the culture of oneness is all around us. And the ambassador broke it down this way too. He said, I'm not a part of the culture. I study the culture. I have to know the culture really well. I watch it. I have to work through the history of that culture. I have to know the nuances of all of this culture so that I can bring forward my government's message. I'm like, well, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we're doing right here. That's why we're studying this. That's why we're going to things like Paganism, going to New Age events, going to a Mormon ward, so that we can understand and better understand and appreciate, let's talk about that, and appreciate what it is that the foreign land is about. And why? Two things. So you can effectively communicate your king's message into that culture. And then second, you can alert the rest of the diplomatic community. All of you are part of that diplomatic community to say, here is where the king's messages are being challenged. Be aware of it. Be ready. Know it. Understand it, so that when you see the challenge come to the king's message in your community, in your life, in your family, you can answer it. You can begin to answer and be a part of it.
100 amens. That's really,
really
well put.
That's really but isn't that what we're doing? Danny, Melissa, Doreen, isn't that what we're doing? Yeah.
That's what we're doing right now.
It's falling.
It's what we do. It's ministry.
Yeah.
It's us being brothers, sisters in Christ. That's a really good analogy, and I like the way that was put. Yeah.
The crazy thing was, I had to hear it from a secular source to get this, drilled into my head. But it made sense because he the guy was living it for his country. He was having to live it. And it forced me to think about, okay, how do we have to live this here?
Well, that's not a lot of churches don't really talk about this sort of thing. They don't talk about what
we right on, Danny. Well, Danny, we just assume we know it. We just assume we know what that means when we are called ambassadors for Christ. We just assume. But no, there's a lot to unpack when you think about it. And so I've rubbed shoulders a lot within the transhumanist community. In fact, in 2013, I'm very grateful for this. The Mormon transhumanists brought me in as a Christian critic of transhumanism, religious transhumanism, and allowed me a platform to give a Christian critique of their movement. And same with paganism and the New Age. Been interacting, again, in real time, on the ground, for a long, long time. And then in terms of the cultural side, evolutionary culture, transformational culture. So that includes things like Burning Man. That includes all kinds of affiliated events and festivals that fits with what I would consider to be not small p paganism and not large p paganism, but if there is such a thing, a middle-sized p paganism. And let me just quickly, if I can, give you an explanation of what I mean. Small p paganism is the general dominant worldview. People might not even know that they accept this worldview. It says essentially this: God, nature, and man are all essentially the same. They share the core. There's a commonality. They are interconnected, interrelated. It's all interdependent. That's small p paganism. It's a generalized worldview. Middle p paganism, like Burning Man, is where you already start to live that. You experience it. It's mostly about the self and the self discovering this. There's not necessarily a overt spiritual overtone to it, but it becomes that. It really does become that. In fact, Larry Harvey, the co-founder of Burning Man, has made that very, very clear. This is a type of spirituality, and you know it when you see it. And then large p paganism is the religious expression. It is Wicca. It is Druidism. It is Voodooism. It is the Eastern concepts and Eastern religions. It is Hinduism. It is the Buddhist worldview, and on it goes. Here's where things get interesting from a biblical point of view. The biblical point of view says, no, reality is not one. My friend Dr. Peter Jones pulls this together beautifully. It's not one. That's what all this side has been. It is two. God, and then everything else. God is separate, God is distinct, he is outside of time, space, and matter. And so reality fundamentally is two. Or you could look at it as this way: otherness versus oneness. Otherness says God is distinct, different, completely, categorically unique. And then he has, in terms of even the creation, values and distinctions and breakdowns and judgments, because there are distinctions within creation as well.
Amen.
From gender to sexuality and on it goes. So that's really the fundamentals of what I do.
Well, can we stop right there and unpack
absolutely
duality? Because, as someone who came out of a lifetime in the New Age and heard all of the complaints about Christianity, was that that duality was low vibration. It was this misunderstanding of the truth. And so I get it now that I'm a Christian and have read the Bible. You understand that what you're talking about is absolutely the truth. And it's pivotal to understand that. But could you talk to people, Carl, who still believe that duality is an essential mistake in understanding the universe?
That's interesting, because it's actually not duality. Duality fundamentally says there's an equality. God has an equal on the black side, Satan, or back and forth. There's an equality between the two, or a dynamic tension between two equally opposing forces or powers. Whereas the biblical worldview is not duality. It is otherness. It is separation. It is a distinction that is completely outside of the created order. And so that's a fundamental thing people need to understand. And it's what it really means then is the God who is other has to personally reveal himself to human history, because we have no comparative points. We can't make this God up. We cannot say, I'm going to imagine this God called Yahweh who declares himself to be literally outside of the creation. We have no comparative points. You can't make up a God like this. And so he has to reveal himself. And that's what we see happening in the biblical narrative. That's the biblical history of God revealing himself in a very specific way, with qualities unique to himself, values unique to himself, and then allowing us to see him at work through the history of the people of Israel and through the people and the places and the events of the Bible. Yeah. And so It's really important for us to recognize that.
Yeah, and that's really an important distinction that you made. Thank you for clarifying that. If I could just springboard from that,
Sure.
coming out of the New Age, and so many people watching our videos are still in the New Age or newly out and they're confused, is the in Genesis, of course, the creation story said that God made humans in his image and likeness. And so that verse is taken so out of context in so many false religions and New Age. And so that's the basis of what I understood the belief in oneness that you mentioned is that if we're made in God's image and likeness, there's no separation, no otherness. So I wonder if you could speak to that, because you're so good at just boiling it down to its essence.
Yeah, your definition of terms is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Very good definition of terms.
I think it's important that we work through what these definitions are, because everything has a meaning. That's interesting. You even say that or acknowledge that, because that itself acknowledges it's not oneness, it's not sameness. Here's Doreen. Here's a thing, and Melissa and Danny. This is a thing that kind of, how do I say this? I find the New Age so interesting. I find the ideas of creating utopia on earth so interesting, because we're looking for a better tomorrow. We're hoping for a better tomorrow. Even the New Age movement, I've met so many people who are hoping for a better tomorrow. Well, look, if oneness is true, there is no better. There is no tomorrow. There's nothing to hope for, ultimately. Because it's not, isn't it not all one? Good and evil, your cancer, your goodness, you spilled your coffee on your lap, you have a really lousy day, you're hoping for a better tomorrow. Nah, what's the point? There is no better. There is no tomorrow. No. We're made in God's image, and I guess this gets back to what you originally asked. We're made in God's image in that we are literally an ambassador for him. We are his expression of his creation on earth. And we're to live out his righteousness, live out his goodness, reflecting his goodness in every aspect here on earth. It's not that we become an equal to him. That's not what it is saying. That's not what it is meaning. We are not his equal, but we are his handiwork made to express himself here on earth.
That's so important to emphasize. Danny, didn't you come from a faith that believed in little gods?
The witnesses?
Yes.
It was Mormonism.
That's
Yeah,
Mormonism?
Mormons, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that's so much in the New Age too, is the quote from Jesus where he's talking to the Pharisee, the judges, ye are gods, and he's quoting the Old Testament. And that's twisted where people believe. And then there's an aspect of kind of new thought Christianity right now saying that you're little gods.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems to be becoming more popular.
Isn't it part of the new Apostolic Reformation movement that you're gods? I saw that in the documentary American Gospel.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, in that book, Bethel puts out, The Physics of Heaven, it goes all into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I had a funny, maybe I shouldn't make light of this, but I have to. I had a funny experience years and years ago. Back in 1999, the Dalai Lama came to Bloomington, Indiana, because his brother at that time was living there. I believe he's passed away now. And there is a large Tibetan Buddhist center in Bloomington. And the Dalai Lama had come for the Kala Chakra ritual and was giving public lectures before the ritual. And of course, this is 1999. This is on the very edges of Y2K. And he was telling us how he had no worries about the coming new century, new millennium, because, well, he has seen millenniums come and go. He has seen the generations come and go. And what he's saying is that he's divine. He has transcended all of this. And it was a God statement. That's really what he was making, a type of God statement. But then at the same time, he talked about his bad skin condition, his poor eyesight, and we had U.S. Secret Service guarding him. And I thought to myself, if I had bought you at the God store, I would take you back as defective. Seriously, you know, well, the idea that we're all a bunch of little gods, I'm sorry, I'm defective. I know that, you know, I am broken. You're broken. Yeah. The beauty about Jesus Christ is he heals the brokenness. He heals the brokenness of our spirit and our soul. Amen. And that's the wonderful thing. I can't heal it myself. The problem doesn't fix itself. So you can play little God all you want, but the problem doesn't fix itself.
You don't realize that you're a sinner. Like you have to recognize that in yourself, you know?
Right.
Danny, I kind of want to let you in on this too, but we both read your book to kind of segue into this, because ever since I finished this particular chapter, I've been just dying to talk about it. I actually, Doreen said I finished your whole book. I actually am on page 527. So technically I haven't finished it, but I did read Burning Man material. I don't think I finished it, but the Burning Man section. And then right before that, I reread how do you pronounce it again? I'm sorry, Carl.
Paganicon. Yes.
Paganicon. It actually sounds good. Paganicon, like that. One of my big things is when I'm reading, your goal with these things seems to educate yourself, so you can educate, the public, which I cannot emphasize enough how much I admire that. Because, with somebody like me, I'm in apologetics, and I completely believe it's 1,000% okay as a Christian to go into these situations within boundaries, of course, to learn for yourself firsthand what they're teaching, what they're doing. Go to a Catholic church, be steady in the Bible, know your word. But I don't mind going to, like, say, a Mormon ward. I would love to go and see what they actually teach. Jehovah's Witnesses, I've gone to their Kingdom Hall many times, things like that. You go into their environment and you learn. And what I loved and respected about what you did is the chapter that I'm in, and I actually marked it, Paganicon, did I say that? There was a ritual space. You're there and you're amongst them, you're watching, you're learning, you're listening. And there was a point where, if I'm understanding correctly, there was a conference room almost, where they had set up like an altar or some sort of worship space. Right. And everybody's walking in, you're like, nope, that's not for me. And you turn to the side and you just watch.
Right.
And I loved that, because there's an element of boundary that we do have as Christians. That whenever we do go into these settings, that there is a point where there is a compromise that happens. So two things with that, and Danny, you can jump in on this because I know you've read the book. I would love to hear any questions you have too, Danny. Okay. Can you expound a little bit on that convention, why you go, and what your goal is?
One question going on Melissa's is, have you gotten any backlash from Christians over going to these events?
Yes.
And if so, how do you, what's your response?
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know something, Danny, I've had a lot of I can't say a lot. I have had a fair amount of backlash, especially now that social media opens up your life. And I'm pretty open on social media.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, with social media, either you're open or you hide. And I've chosen to be fairly open. And that has, a lot of questions that have popped up from people. How do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? Aren't you supposed to run from darkness? Lots of different things. A lot of people have a lot of fears too, I found out, just in private interactions. First of all, and I'll try to address both. One with Paganicon. In that particular time in 2017, going into that ritual space, no, that wasn't for me, especially because they were doing things to you ritually as you walked in the room. And that's why I refrained. I could stay back and watch, but I did not want to enter in as rituals were performed on myself to purify myself to sit in their space. I just came back a couple of weeks ago from the 2019 Paganicon, and there I did sit in, but I did not have to go through any type of purification rituals. There was nothing preliminary for me to have to wrestle with and feel uncomfortable with, but I was able to watch and sit in on a few of the rituals. The one that was by far the most interesting and disturbing at the same time was I watched the marriage of heaven and hell, which is a very arcane ritual. Where you have in the conference room a circle of power laid out on the floor with angelic names encircling the circle. You have a Christian magician basically pulling from underground Catholic, occult Catholic type writings and beliefs from the medieval period. And then on the other side of the room, actually just really up against, because the circles were fairly large, up against each other, was a Satanist who held to the Satanist Luciferian path. And he had a circle of power. And there was body piercing, there was bloodletting, and even blood drinking. And, you know, I watched the whole thing unfold. And afterwards, we were able to talk to them and see, okay, how did this all come about, and what's the meaning? And even the people who attended, some of them were quite disturbed, especially with the bloodletting and the blood drinking side of it. But as I was sitting in that, my spirit inside for the first 10 minutes, there was a certain amount of turmoil. It wasn't fear, but definitely you're uncomfortable, and you should be uncomfortable. Okay, you really should be uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable place to be. And for the first 10 minutes or so, I'm praying that the entities that were being invoked, because we were told they would show up, that they wouldn't show up. And then about 10 minutes into it, I was like, almost, I don't want to say God spoke to me, but definitely implanted the thought in my mind, look, God is in charge, ultimately, of those spiritual entities. And if any of them do come into the room, at the bottom line is every single person in that room, every single personality in that room, including the spiritual personalities, all of them, every single one, including every person listening to this podcast, will bend their knee to Christ. Now, we bend our knee in love now. They will be bending their knee in judgment later. Why do I have to fear them?
Amen.
Why do I have to fear?
So
is he inside of me not greater than what's happening? Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely felt uncomfortable, and it was uncomfortable. But there was a situation where I felt I could go in. I didn't feel. I knew I could go in because I wasn't having to participate or actively engage in accepting. I could observe and stay at an observer's, kind of point of view.
So what's for your defense? Because I'm somebody who does that. I mean, I've gone to Danny, the Jehovah's Witness Memorial, which many people would say is satanic, which it is. Mm-hmm. You're denying the blood and body of Christ physically. They don't know that. But I remember saying that I was going one year, and I got they're like, you shouldn't go because of this or that. And I'm all, no, we should go. I'm going for witnessing reasons.
It's actually really quite boring.
It's very boring.
Huh?
It's very boring.
The JW Memorial is boring.
Yeah. And it's
nothing happens.
So, and even Danny, even you, it's like, what would you say? How do you respond to these people who give you a hard time about actually going to put yourself in these situations?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and you're right. First of all, a lot of this is boring. I mean, I sat through a lot of workshops and just lectures and panel discussions. It's more almost academic than anything else. Even at Paganicon, that level is there. When I've been to global governance meetings, yes, it's far more academic. It's business suits, especially at the global governance level.
What's your goal with it? Like, why?
My goal?
Yeah.
Right. There's a few goals. Number one, so I'm educated, so I understand this, so I can appreciate and know what's happening. Look, if I'm a doctor, if I'm a mechanic, if I'm a farmer, you are constantly upgrading yourself. If you're a teacher, you're constantly upgrading yourself in your particular field. You're always learning. There's no difference here. You're just learning. You're learning and you're learning. So you're doing that, number one, for yourself, and number two, so that you can talk to the Christian community about it. And then after that, so that if possible, you can talk to those others around you, even those maybe who are right there in your midst. And I had that opportunity at Paganicon to actually sit down with a New Thought leader, and he was a chaplain for the New Thought movement. And we had about a 2-hour conversation, and we brought up oneness versus two-ness and all of that. And so you are looking for those opportunities too. It's more than just research. If you have the opportunity to reach out, and you have to be careful with that too, but you do reach out. When we go to Burning Man, we do that specifically. And here's the other thing that for me has been so important. It's allowed me to empathize. Okay? Mm-hmm. I walked away from Paganicon with a lump in my throat because I'm like, these are nice people. I enjoy being with these people. I've had good conversations. I've shared meals. and allows you to empathize. And that is so, I realize is so, so important because they're made in God's image too.
I respect that so much. That was, I marked all over that page whenever you stepped aside, but you were talking about, you know, just going in and going into like this war zone basically. And just, I really wanted to touch on that and emphasize that I cannot tell you how much I respect that you have that out.
Yeah,
You're
I
very
mean,
honest with it. Yeah.
that's what Jesus modeled, right? Jesus spent time with the tax collectors and the sinners, and he said that sick people need doctors.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, oh, sorry, Danny.
Carl, what sort of people go to like Paganism? I mean, because I know I have a presupposition of, you know, people that probably don't look like I do, or look like you do, or look like we do, but they probably are, aren't they? They probably
They look exactly like we do. They're regular people. You know, they are nurses, they are doctors, they are parents, they're children. People do dress up sometimes in the costume, especially Saturday night at the Equinox Ball. Of course, then they come in costume, and then other times, yeah, people will be wearing clothing that will reflect their particular path. We had Satanists with, you know, the pentagrams. We had Luciferians there with the pentagrams. And then we have people wearing other shirts and just other things during the course of the weekend that allows you to know, okay, you know, what you're part of or what coven you might be part of, that type of thing. But for the most part, you rub shoulders with these people. They're all around you. They look like you and me. It's yeah, that's the world we're living in. And I think it's so important as Christians, we get our heads, you know, kind of out of the sand that way and realize that this is the world we're in right now. And I just went to where it's concentrated. Just go spend time in a used bookstore, go talk to people in the coffee shop. You're going to see that this is all around you. You know, I've got a friend, I know, Doreen, you want to ask me a question, sorry. I have a friend who's passed away now, but my wife emulated and did the same thing my friend did just a couple of weeks ago. When he would see people at a used bookstore reading, let's say, a New Age book or a work on philosophy or even a Christian book, he'd walk up to them and just simply ask the question, so, do you really believe what you're reading? And then he would use that as an opening point just to talk to them, to share with them. And it was very small, but also effective. And so they're all around you. They look like you and me because they're people.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that, just starting conversations with people, you know, because I'm a born evangelist. When I was in the New Age, I was evangelizing New Age. And now that I'm a full-on Christian, I evangelize wherever I go. You ask Melissa, I've got tracts with me in my purse everywhere I go. But I wanted to ask you about, you know, the armor of God or any sort of protection that you do to go into that environment.
Sure. Well, first of all, you're going in knowing why you're going. You're not going there as a voyeur. You're not going there to be titillated. You're not going there for whatever other reason might be there. You're going there to learn. You're going there knowing where you stand in your own faith. Okay, that's really, really important. You pray. My wife prays. Others are praying for me. But you're not going in there with the attitude that I'm coming to demonstrate myself before you. You're not going there as the Westboro Baptist Church, nothing like that. So you're going in there with a completely different demeanor. You're going in there to learn. You're going in there to be respectful. And in terms of putting on the full armor, yes, you're going in there already with the helmet, with the breastplate. You're going in there with the knowledge of truth. You're going in there with the knowledge of your own faith and being honest about your own limitations. One of the things at Burning Man, Burning Man, there's a very sexual side to Burning Man. It's not as in your face as a lot of people might think it is. There's so much clickbait out there about Burning Man, but there is a sexual side, a very strong sexual side. And so you go in already knowing that there is a moral line in the sand, a spiritual line in the sand. Melissa, just as you were talking about earlier, yes, there's a separating point when you know you shouldn't walk into that situation. For example, that 2017 ritual, you don't. And you have that moral, spiritual line in the sand. And that's important. And you have that already in your head and in your heart before you ever step foot in the place.
You know, I think that's a really good segue into Burning Man. So for the last part of our interview, we're going to wrap it up with one of my favorite things that I've been wanting to ask you about since I met you, or since people started telling me about you. And I've never heard, at that point, I had never heard of Burning Man. I had no idea what it was. I had to be educated on that. I have a friend, Tiffany, we interviewed her as well on our on Doreen's channel. She used to be a burner, and she would talk about Burning Man. She would talk about, I had no idea what she's talking about. And I would see pictures and I'm, oh yeah, I've seen that. That looks familiar, you know, because some of the art, you know, is pretty well known depending on the pieces. I am still on the path of learning what Burning Man is, why it's so big. I'm still, you know, in that education phase, but I would love to hear from you firsthand. First, what is Burning Man? Why do you go? Talk about Burning Man. Tell us what it is. Why is it so on our radar as Christians that we need to know this? And what can we do about it?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's like a whole afternoon program.
I know. We have like 30 minutes, so have fun with that.
First of all, I'm in your boat. I'm still learning myself. Okay. And that's one of the reasons I still go. I've only gone twice to the big burn. I've gone to a regional burn because there are many regional burns across the country and even around the world. And I've been to a couple of other events that draw from the Burning Man kind of model or the energy of Burning Man, and including the rave scene, because that fits hand in glove. There's an element to the rave scene that kind of fits within it as well. And this is what's considered to be evolutionary culture or transformational culture. You know, if oneness can be, and this is where I kind of broke into this, it was asking the question, okay, first of all, if oneness can be demonstrated in the world of global governance and politics, and it can, I break that down in my book. Mm-hmm. If it can be demonstrated through transhumanism, and it can, if it's demonstrated, and that's the technological side of oneness. If it can be demonstrated in religion and interfaithism, and yes, it can. Again, it's easily broken down. I mean, yeah, we did this with this crazy big book. There has to be a cultural expression of this too. Oh, yeah. And not just a cultural expression of what's on the television, but a lived cultural experience. And that's what Burning Man is. It's that lived cultural experience where you, even if you're a secularist, walk into it and walk out of it going, that was transformational, that was spiritual, that was sacred. And that's the kind of language you end up hearing when you go to Burning Man, that this is a very spiritual setting, a very spiritual place, especially around the temple. Now, Burning Man, if people don't know what it is, it's a gathering. It's argued, is this a festival? Well, kind of is, but it isn't. But it is certainly a gathering. And it's a gathering of about 80,000 people in one of the harshest environments, the desert of Black Rock in northern Nevada. It is, the windstorms are brutal. It's an alkali lake bed. So we don't have sandstorms, we have alkali dust storms, which is just wild stuff, wild stuff. And yeah, 80,000 people get together. There are rules. A lot of people think it's ruleless, it's anarchy. No, there's a lot of rules. In fact, it's the one thing that almost kind of surprised me the first time I went, how many rules there were, and even unwritten rules. I'm like, I thought this was like wide open. You guys are doing everything. I know. And there's a lot more police there than people realize. There's a ton of cops. Last year I watched drug busts happen as they had a rolling drug lab come in and snagging people up. And yeah, you know, so, okay, there's lots of stuff going on. It's clothing optional. There is a strong heightened sexuality to a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it. It is experiential and experimental. It is literally the sandbox to create a new way of living and relating. And that's how it really is couched. It's a sandbox for a new social order. And what happens is you have hundreds of things happening all at once. Here's the 2018 program book, 190 pages, 10 events per page. It's not a singular event, it's thousands of events under one umbrella. Here's a 2017 book. It's called the Where, What, When Guide. Yes, 2017 its theme was radical ritual. Again, emphasizing the spirituality side of it.
Yeah, I was going to say the symbolism on that is disturbing.
Yep. And then the 2018 symbol is the man as a robot, because the theme was I, Robot. And the entire event oozed the whole theme of transhumanism and Burning Man really asks questions of what it is where does our meaning come from? Where does society generate its purpose? And so for 2018, the question was really, how far can man and machine integrate? How is this happening?
And what's the symbolism behind burning the effigy at the end? I've seen that so many times on social media, and I had a friend who used to go. But what is the reason for burning that man?
When Larry Harvey and those who were part of the original burn, when they first did it, there was really no specific meaning. They did it on the summer solstice of 1986. Really, the symbolism of it is more or less the idea of birth, death, regeneration, rebirth, this cycle that's always there. And it does take on a ritualistic aspect. Larry Harvey understood that completely. If I give him credit, he was well read on comparative mythologies and comparative religions. And so he integrated the experience. Really, it's an experience. He integrated that experience into something that forces even a secularist to go into it and go, oh, there is something bigger than life here. And they feel like you're now connecting into something greater than yourself. And he described it this way. Larry Harvey described it this way. It's not about looking for a supreme being, but about looking for what is supreme in being. Wow. There's a huge difference, unbelievably huge difference. And so really it's the sense of birth, regeneration. There's all that goes into it, this play in it. And then because it's burned, that's why it's called Burning Man. At the end of the week, I'm going to say we because I'm there observing. Some people get freaked out when I say we, but we burn it. At the end of it all, we burn it. It's gone. This incredible effigy, and it's incredible. It's huge. It's monstrous. There's so much energy, money, work that goes into it. And then the next day, the following Sunday, the temple is burned, a huge temple. Last year's temple was 65 feet tall, about 200 to 250 feet wide. It was shaped with a spiral going up. The amount of work and attention and detail was just, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. And that burns at the end too. And it is a sense of their release. And it's a place where people are coming. They're grieving at the temple. People are literally grieving. And you walk around, there's literally hundreds of people all around you, and they are allowing themselves to release their anger, their emotion, their fears, all of this. But you talk to them afterwards. You talk to them after the temple is burnt. And my friend did this last year. He went around asking, did you leave something at the temple? Because people often will come and leave, let's say, photo albums or personal journals, or they'll write notes. I've seen wedding dresses hung up in the temple. I've watched as families have brought urns of the ashes of their loved ones, this type of thing. So my friend asked the question last year, did you leave anything? Yes. Well, now that it's burned, do you feel a sense of peace, a sense of release, a sense of joy? No, I don't. No, of course not. You're looking for a permanent solution in something that's temporary.
Right.
Yeah. When I read, because I started the Burning Man chapter, so it's fresh in my mind, I got very curious about it. So, you go online, you read people, what they're saying about it. And there was this one particular article. It was a blog that he wrote about his visit to Burning Man. He goes every year and why he goes. And of course, it's just, you can't explain it. It's like so hard to explain. According to him, you have to experience it. But one of the things that really stuck out to me in what he was writing is that you leave your identity at home. It's like you go to Burning Man and you can be whatever you want. You can be
Right.
whoever you want. You are, in his words, he was basically saying it's like you're your truest self. And I'm over here thinking, for a week, you know, and it doesn't last, you know, and that is, that's the whole idea. There was a meme last week that got posted, Stephen Bancar's, he's quoted, the New Age is like spiritual fast food. And he was joking, he's like, I recant that. It's not food at all. Because it really does. It leaves you wanting more. You're
Right.
always hungry for more. And I'm reading what he's writing about how mystical Burning Man is, how he felt just absolutely open and honest and raw and real, and his childlike self and all this. And then he goes back to reality to work on Monday. And I'm like, can you imagine feeling fed spiritually? You know, full, fulfilled all the time. You know, and even in your low points, whenever you're not feeling close to God, he's there, you know? And I'm like, that's what they're missing, you know? And it seems like Burning Man, everything about it just seems so temporary, and it really feeds our carnal desires.
Didn't Tiffany tell us that she was part of gospel evangelizing at Burning Man? Someone told me that.
It was probably Carl.
Oh, was it?
Okay. Probably Carl. Tiffany used to go to Burning Man.
She hasn't gone back since she's converted.
No. She, Jen has gone with Carl. Carl has gone many times. I think Tiffany used to actually go and participate in Burning Man.
As a New Ager. And so you do evangelizing there, Carl?
Yeah, we actually set up a sign at our tent, and the sign says "Camp of the Unknown God," which comes out of Acts 17, when Paul goes to Mars Hill.
Yep.
And Paul is being an ambassador for Christ at Mars Hill, and actually is emulating what that looks like in a pagan culture.
Yeah.
Which is asking provocative questions, finding a leverage point into the culture by using the culture, and then bringing forward the message of Jesus Christ to that culture. Not waiting for them to come to you, but you going to them.
Wow.
And so that's what we basically did. So we set up this camp. It's just a sign. It's a small sign. We're a small group. I mean, we're a little pimple in the mountain of what Burning Man is.
Melissa, are you going to go? Are you going to go evangelize now?
Oh man, I don't know.
And so,
hot.
So people see our sign and they'll ask. I mean, they'll literally ask questions like this: "Who is the unknown God?" Okay.
Let's talk about that.
You can't get a more open door than that, really, honestly. Yeah. And so, hey, come sit in the shade. Here's some water. Here's some Gatorade. Here's some food. Tell us about yourself. Talk to us. Let us know who you are. You know, they'll talk for 10, 15 minutes because we want to know who they are. Right. We're not just doing that for the sake of doing it. We want to know who you are because you're a person. You're valuable. And then we bring it back around to the question that you just asked. Whatever that opening was that compelled them to walk into our camp. And we'll talk, and it might be half an hour, it might be an hour, it might be 2 hours. And they might come 2-3 times. Last year we had people coming in and out all week long. And it was really good. Dozens of good, hard, meaningful conversations. We don't know where it goes. I'm still in touch with some of the same people. I mean, we have relationships we built with them. And in all of this, the gospel message is brought forward. The message of truth is brought forward. I remember being at the first burn that I attended, and a young Russian artist and I were talking, and we were talking about what is spirituality and the temporary nature of his spirituality. He was an esotericist. He comes, basically the New Age in a way, except more on the darker side. And yes, it's all really, ultimately, there's a darkness to all of that. You can't deny that. It's all dark. And he was telling me about how spiritual this place was. I agreed. Yes, it is spiritual. It is. But it's a temporary spirituality. So temporary that at the end of the week, we burn it all and walk away. You're chasing after the gospel of experience. And the experiences come and go. And because you are never satisfied with the experience, you always need more experiences. You're returning over and over and over again. You're always going to chase whatever it is because you got nowhere else to go. The beautiful thing about biblical Christianity is that it's not the gospel of experience. Experiences can happen, and they do happen. Mm-hmm. But your relationship with God is there. It is stable. It is concrete, no matter how bad I feel or how good I feel. It's not the gospel of experience. Mm-hmm. It's the gospel of not what is true, who is true.
Amen.
You know, and that's really the bottom line. And so that's what we do, and we're there. That's part of it. And then I go to all kinds of workshops and lectures because I'm there doing research too. Mm-hmm. This is like, you know, this is a sandbox for rediscovering a new social order. I'll just give you a real quick breakdown of what some of that might look like. I was at a workshop last year on cryptocurrencies at Burning Man. I'm not going to give the guy's name, but he's a leading light in the cryptocurrency world. He had just come back from a psychedelic experience, a 4-day ayahuasca ceremony, and he was imparting to us his new knowledge and new experiences. And in the space of about 2 hours or so, because it was an all-afternoon workshop, he broke down what the new civilization would look like from his point of view, okay? Again, this is in the space of 2 hours, but I'm just giving you the Coles note. He basically said the new civilization breaks down into 4 building blocks. The first one is a new spirituality. It is a oneness spirituality. It is mystical. It is mythical. It is psychedelic. It is Eastern. It is oneness. We are throwing away biblical Christianity, the Judeo-Christian concept that God is other, and this is what we embrace. The second building block is a new social relationship, a new social order, a new way of doing relationships with each other, individually to individual, but also within the context of we, the community. He says, that's what we're doing at Burning Man. We're building this on the fly. We're experimenting with it in real time. That's what Burning Man is. Then he says we need a digital currency, a cryptocurrency that's attached to block 1 and block 2. How you interact with block 1 and block 2 will determine whether or not you can purchase, whether or not you can buy or sell. Really interesting. And at this point, for some folks, especially as Christians, you should be going, okay, wow. And then he said, basically, how do we manage this whole thing? How do we manage a digital world that's attached to the new spirituality and that reflects the new social order? How will we manage the whole thing? Through artificial intelligence. It all has to be digitized. It all has to be placed within some type of a global blockchain system, some type of a distributed ledger system, where it has a global reach. Will the new culture look like this? I don't know, but that's where we're going. It's one idea. No, thank you. That sounds like the concept of oneness in every one of its categories, from culture to spirituality to technology to governance, even all the way into art and expression. All of it now coalesces. Oneness coalesces into something that becomes. It actually kind of sounds almost authoritative, totalitarian.
It sounds like end-time prophecies.
It does, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It does.
Scary.
Well, Danny, I kind of wanted to touch base with you, and I wanted to see if you had any other questions, and Doreen, you as well.
Well, I got too many, but information's great. I mean, it's like I was telling Melissa earlier, Carl. I said I used to be this just proves to me that all the conspiracies I thought were real really are real, and I'm okay with it.
See, and that's what I like about your stuff, Carl, is that I'm pretty open about, I'm just not a conspiracy theorist. I think that there are obviously some stuff that we can go out and look at and observe and almost take like a science to it and disregard it or take it as truth. And that's right. Kind of what you do. I don't think conspiracy, this is more research. This is stuff that I can get behind. And
conspiracy fact.
Yes, yeah. So it's more, yeah. It's just, hey man, we should really keep our eye on this. Here's why, and here's 10 reasons why this is more factual. Whereas other people who get into these like fast food conspiracy theories, there's no basis for them at all whatsoever. They're just in a element of paranoia, and they just go down this crazy rabbit hole. And I'm just like, okay, so the earth is hollow and flat now. And we have, you know what I mean? Like, we have all these weird, crazy conspiracies, and there's just stuff I can't get behind. But the reason why I like your work and the way you think and the way you do it is that it is backed up, and there's a large element of logic behind it that I find compelling and I can follow. So as your fellow ambassador, thank you for sharing that information. You know?
Absolutely. No, you're welcome. And here's the irony. I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist.
No, you're not. I don't either.
I don't either.
I know.
Information out there.
Right, right. You just go to where it's happening, and then you can document it. Hey, it's real. This is real. You know, it really boils down to taking a look at Genesis chapter 3, which says that we can be as God. It's the forbidden fruit, the knowledge that we can be as God. We know good and evil, and we will live forever. That was a deception. Okay, that was the first.
That was the lie of the devil. Still tells the same lie.
Still tells the same lie. And Game of Gods, my book, unpacks that in its larger manifestations, in its collective manifestation, its group manifestations. It's just simply an extension of Genesis chapter 3, lived out and experienced, and it's been a part of our human story ever since.
And that's why God sent his only begotten Son, so that we who are broken from that fall, from our ancestors listening to the devil in the garden, that we could be saved.
Yep.
So thank you so much for your book and your time today. Carl Teichrich's website is gameofgods.ca, Canada, GAMEOFGODS.ca, and of course his book, Game of Gods. Carl, one of the things we love to do is put our guests on the spot and ask if they will pray out the video. And I wonder if you would be so kind as to do that for us today.
Absolutely. It's an honor. It's not being put on the spot, Doreen. It's an honor. Lord Jesus, we are grateful that we can come before you, and that you have a desire for a relationship with us, and that it's not temporary, that it is not hollow, it is not a surface relationship, but that you change our lives, and that you change lives for your sake and for eternity's sake and for our sake, Lord. We just ask that what has been said and done during this time together, that it'll be honoring to you, and that in all of this, Lord, your word, your message, your goodness can extend out to others. We just pray that you would not give us a fear of man, rather a fear of you, that causes us to seek your wisdom and your goodness, and that we can be bold ambassadors armed with love and truth. We pray all this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Carl, it's been an absolute pleasure. Obviously, we all have so many more questions that we could ask you. We could have gone on for 3 hours. We really appreciate your time. We know you're a very busy man, and I hope everyone will buy and read your book, Game of Gods, and visit your website, gameofgods.ca.
Well, thank you all three of you for bringing me on your platform.